So that's going to bring us to Ecclesiastes chapter 7, and we're going to read the first 6 verses. So starting in verse 1, a good name is better than a good ointment, and the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, because that is the end of every man, and the living takes it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for when a face is sad, a heart may be happy. The mind of the wise is in the house of mourning, while the mind of fools is in the house of pleasure. It is better to listen to the rebuke of a wise man than for one to listen to the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorn bushes under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. And this too is futility. Are you all as confused the first time through? It takes a little while to go back like we do, and we unpack it verse by verse. We see what the verse says, and we leave it always in context of what he's been talking about, never taking it out of context. So in verse 1, how does Solomon continue to demonstrate the reality of how man is to respond when he is aware of God's sovereignty? That's what he's just been talking about. He says that a good name is better than a good ointment. All right, well, let's unpack that. What is a good name? What is meant by someone having a good name? Good reputation, right? You know that that name for that person has a reputation that goes with it. It can also have the other, right? You can have a bad name, which is a bad reputation. So this good name or a man's reputation is more important than what? Than a good ointment. What's an ointment? It can be healing. Here's what I'll do. Let's look at 2 other places in the scripture where that word is used, just so we make sure that we're leaving in context, right, of how the scripture uses the word. So in Daniel chapter 10, verse 3, this is what Daniel says. He says, I did not eat any tasty food, nor did meat or wine enter my mouth, nor did I use any ointment at all until the entire 3 weeks were completed. Okay, so he took away any form of pleasure. He didn't eat, or he was fasting, and he didn't even do ointment. So it would have been a regular thing that they did in that day, and he forgoes it for a period of time. Then in the New Testament, in John chapter 11, verse 2, we hear, it was the Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So if you're familiar with that story, this is where she breaks open this container and she pours it out on Jesus. It's an ointment, all right? Very valuable, very valuable. So let's just say the milkmaid often didn't get ointment, right? It was not for the poor. It was for the wealthy that got to enjoy this. So this would best be described as a perfumed oil. It soothes the skin. And by the way, ladies, it covers adverse odors. If you think about the fact that these folks didn't have an opportunity to shower or bathe every day, there's sometimes something that needs to be overcome in the moment, and perfume was a way to do that, to make each other tolerable. So it was a luxury item. It is used topically, and its effects are temporary. That's why you need to put it on again, right? Just because you put some lotion on today doesn't mean you don't need to do it again tomorrow and the next day. So that's the comparison of the two. So a man's reputation of a good name is based on what he is. It is what a man will be remembered as. That is considered far more valuable than an expensive yet surface and temporary scent. So what is long-lasting is more important than what's temporary and passing. That's the comparison that he gives us there. How does verse 1 end? And the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. Keeping in context, okay? How does the day of one's death parallel with the previous verse? What was the better thing in the first part of verse 1? The good name. So death is like the good name in terms of the comparison. When ultimately is a man's good name established? When he's gone. Right? When you're gone is when it's kind of cemented. When the story is completed, then the judgment can be made if he has a good reputation or not. Many men stumble before the end, and that can affect their reputation. Right? So it's at death that it's sealed. You can't do anything else, good or bad. That's when you would do the measurement of someone's reputation. So a man who has a good reputation is better off at the end of his journey, where he can't ruin his reputation, than a man at his birth who has his whole life in front of him to either have a good or a bad reputation. Does that make sense? Why death in this case would be better than life? All right, so do you see why it's important that we see the correlation between the beginning of the verse and the end of the verse in order to find its meaning, as well as leaving it in context to what Solomon's been talking about? Does that make sense? This is how you navigate waters of this type of scripture when you're trying to understand it. It is difficult, but it is not impossible. We can do that. So, let's go on here in verse 2. What two extremes does Solomon compare next? It's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. In your gut reaction, does that seem opposite to you? Right? We'd all rather go to a party than to go to a funeral. And if you are the other way, people would think you have a problem. Right? So in its natural sense, this seems opposite. So what is a house of mourning? For us, it's a funeral. It's where there's grief, sadness. So a house of mourning is where the living people go to lament or grieve when someone has died. We often now say we are having a celebration of a person's life, but it's where we gather together for that remembrance, whatever that remembrance was. What is a house of feasting? It's a celebration. A celebration usually in terms of an event. A birthday party. For the folks in the Old Testament, there would have been their feasts, right, that are scheduled at different times throughout the year. You went to feast. You were gathering together to remember something, and when you're eating and feasting, that's usually because it's a positive or happy event. So, verse 2, why is the house of mourning better? He says, because that is the end of every man, and the living takes it to heart. So what happens at a house of mourning when it is the end of the man? What do you do when you go to a funeral? You reflect on the life of the person who's now no longer with you, right? And it's the benefit isn't for that person. Can they hear all the words being spoken to them? I know there's people with different opinion, but I will tell you, no, they're not there. They don't hear what's being said. So the benefit then is for the living, right? That's what the benefit is for. It's his reputation that is being eulogized or remembered at that moment, okay? So those who are left behind are referred to as what in that verse? He says, no, he goes on, he says, and the living. Right? And the living would be those who were left alive going to this house of mourning for this event of reflecting on this person's life. What do those who are left behind do? Take it to heart. What is the it referring to? The end, the death. So the end of a person's life can have a profound effect on those who are left behind. It can impress on us what we want to be like, or what that person was in our lives, or it can warn us not to be like that person in our lives. Either way, the living take it to heart. Right? There's a moment where you sit and you reflect on some very serious words when you're sitting at a funeral. They will penetrate hearts in a way. I mean, in some cases in our culture, it's about the only time that people who don't say they believe in God will come in and hear about the end of life and hear about God. So it's a moment of reflection in many ways. So it's not only about that person's death. Sometimes it's just the concept of death. It's a reminder, guess what? We all go here. So it's the somberness that the living are left with, and they take it to heart. So in verse 3, when one takes these things to heart, what can be true? Sorrow is better than laughter, for when a face is sad, a heart may be happy. Okay, again, if I were to just read that to you, doesn't that seem counterintuitive? Right? When do you sit around and have a sad face, but you're really happy inside? Does that happen on a normal basis? No. That's right. Some of us do. So when someone dies, why are those left behind sorrowful? You want them back. You're sad that they're gone, right? So when someone dies and there is only laughter, why would that be true? Those left behind will be better off. We find the true definition to this sorrow in the second half of the verse, which says what? When a face is sad, but the heart is happy. So when the person who is gone was a person with a good reputation, or spiritually speaking, we would say maybe one who was a believer, we are still sad in our temporal circumstances, right? We're sad that they're gone, but from an eternal measurement, we can be happy in our hearts. We'll see them again. So does that make sense why he's tying that into the context of talking about birth and death and house of mourning, that's when this can be true? We can be sad, because of course it's a sad thing, and unfortunately there are Christians with a lot of, good intentions when they tell someone that in the moment. Ladies, don't do that. In the moment, you let somebody just grieve and deal with the grief. You can talk later with them about the long-term benefit of, by the way, they're in a better place, or, whatever words of comfort. But man, in the moment, people just need to feel their grief, and that's okay. Weep with them. That's exactly right. So there's no other time that I can think of when a sad face appears when the heart is happy. That is not a common experience. So this also stays with the context of the preceding verses, right? This is part of the reason we do this study together, is for you to learn, how do you study the Bible? How do you approach the scriptures? This is how you leave them in context and figure out what the meaning could be from a higher level or a spiritual level, leaving it in context. Verse 4, how does this theme continue? The mind of the wise is in the house of mourning, while the mind of fools is in the house of pleasure. So a wise man will embrace death where? In the house of mourning. A wise man shows up and deals with the emotions and deals with what goes on, right, in experiencing death in the house of mourning. What does the fool embrace? The house of pleasure. So the fool will escape to a place of pleasure instead of embracing the mourning. The fool tries to run away from death in every way. And you know that resonates in your heart, because I bet every single one of you know people who, when the tough times come, and especially something like death, they don't want to talk about it. They're not going to be part of it. They are going to run from it. And they usually run to, for them, places of pleasure. Something to distract them. So Solomon is saying, for the wise, we don't run there. We deal with the house of mourning and the grieving and all that goes with it, and God speaking and this, all of it. Whereas the fool will escape it, run away in every way they can, and not to deal with it. Remember, this is a book of wisdom, but pessimism, right? It has a very somber impact. That's a good thing, and we often need that. So in verse 5, what will the wise man in the house of mourning find? It's better to listen to the rebuke of a wise man. So those who speak of death will embrace the good things and the bad things demonstrated in the life of the one who has died. When you're there contemplating, that's what you will do. You'll talk about the good things, and maybe you'll even embrace the things that they wish they hadn't done, or maybe they shared that with somebody. I wish I'd done this instead. I mean, not to get too far off topic, but how many times do you hear people say on their deathbed before they leave, wow, I really wish I would have spent more time with my family instead of careers or whatever else, right? It's a sad thing when that is what that person is ending their life with. When they say those things, they can't go back and change those things. So what would those words have the hope of doing for somebody else? Changing the other people's lives so they won't make that same mistake. So even those who've lived a foolish life can look back and give wisdom about what you should do different. Doesn't that sound like the entire book of Ecclesiastes from Solomon? These are the things not to do. That's what he's sharing. So a wise man will find the rebuke of wise counsel in the house of mourning. In contrast to wise men finding counsel from wise men, the fool sought after the house of pleasure and found what? Then for one to listen to the song of fools. That's how those two tie together. There's counsel of the wise, or there's the song of the fools. So a wise man will seek counsel in the tough times, while the fool continues to drown out counsel and only run away to escape with pleasure and put forth with even soothing songs to feel better temporarily. The sting of the reminder that death awaits us all should be sobering and cause men to reflect on their short lives. That's what makes it so sobering, right? Because we look and go, well, I'm this old and we're supposed to have this much life, right? And we go, oh, where am I and what am I doing with all that? We have confirmation of the same thought process in Psalms, and in Psalms 90, verses 10 through 12, we hear this. As for the days of our life, they contain 70 years, or if due to strength, 80 years. Yet their pride is but labor and sorrow, for soon it is gone and we fly away. Who understands the power of your anger and your fury according to the fear that is due you? So teach us to number our days that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. So in limited days that we have, the focus is for us to have a heart of wisdom. We're going to look at exactly what kind of wisdom that is as we get further in Ecclesiastes. So back in Ecclesiastes, verse 6 of chapter 7, what picture does Solomon give us to make his point? He says, "For the crackling of thorn bushes under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool, and this too is futility." I know you all know what this means, right? What is the picture of a crackling of thorn bushes? Right, it's thorn bushes. But they crackle like a little sparkler that the kids do, right? I mean, it just crackles and it makes a lot of noise, okay? But what do you put under a pot? We don't do this, ladies, because we have a nice invention called a stove. Right? We just turn a little electricity on, or get the little gas flow in there, and there it is. But that's not what happened here. If you were living back here, ladies, you would have a pot that you needed to heat up for dinner, and you had to get a fire going, and then you put the pot over the fire, and the goal is to heat it up. That's what is pictured by something being fire under a pot. So what type of wood would you choose if you're trying to heat up a pot? Chunks of real wood, something that's going to be long burning and get the heat going and heat up dinner that you've got in the pot. So the thorn bushes are only crackling to look like a fire, but they do not produce the actual heat to cook anything. In the same way of only looking like something real, what did Solomon conclude with? So is the laughter of the fool. So the laughter of the fool is a disguise for what is real. The laughter makes it look like the fool is happy, but he is not. This disguise for the fool is what? Futility. Does that picture now make sense when you break apart what it's a picture of and you tie it back to what Solomon's been talking about? Right? I had no idea when I read that. I'm like, crackling thorn bushes? What does that have to do with anything? But if you take your time and you ask yourself questions, all right, what is crackling thorn bushes? What do they look like? What are they for? Why is it under a pot? Those are the kind of questions that you walk through to discover what it's about. Does it make sense now that we've walked through it? It has a meaning for us. It has a picture for us. So when you see the little firecrackers that the kids do in their hand, right, you can think about this. And this is what a fool does. Yes, question?
I just think it's also like a temporary versus eternal.
Exactly. Temporary versus eternal. What the fool does in pretending that they're happy is they're not really happy, but they're not turning to deal with the sorrow in the morning and the wisdom that could be provided in the moment, which would be the long term. It's too long away. It's too hard. And they ran to their pleasure and to escape. And we all know this to be true. We have all dealt with people, and some of us have done it in our own lives, run away from difficult things, right? And gone to pleasure, gone to things to distract us. It's what we do in our human nature, in our temporal selves. Nobody goes, yay, I'm going to embrace sadness and extreme, hard, difficult things today. Whew. Right? That's not what we're drawn to, except if in the moment we have the Spirit and it's the will of the Lord and we say to the Lord, please help me deal with today's difficult situation or heartache or hurt or pain or loss or fill in the blank. That's where you go. That's where you find long-term comfort, not a temporary solution. Yes?
A lot of times they're laughing, and so the habit is.
That's right. So we have somebody saying that sometimes the laughter is brought on by the sense of looking for pleasure. So with too much wine or too much, music can do that. Get somebody all excited and they're all happy and they dance to the music, but they've not dealt with the feelings that are underneath. How many of you have seen somebody, there was even an interview yesterday, have seen somebody that is asked a difficult question and there's this awkward, uncomfortable laugh as they go to answer it? Right? They're just caught in that, yeah. They're not really feeling good about it. They're not really jovial when they're doing the laughing. You've caught them in a very awkward situation. And so that laugh is a distraction. It's not truly a laugh, and it's not truly trivial. It really is a cover-up for something that's much deeper that that person is thinking or feeling or processing at the time. So that's the easy verses of chapter 7, 1 through 6. Now, it's a long chapter. I'm just going to reassure you up front, I did not try to tackle 29 verses for today. So you can rest assured that we're making it about halfway, and the other half will be done next week, because there's a lot packed in here. All right. Yeah. Well, let's just say it just wasn't going to happen. Because part of it is you can't give enough processing time to each of these and make them connect back. Now, I could just run through and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, that's not going to do any good for anybody. We need to take our time. We need to be the ones to be sober in processing what's being said here. So let's go to the next section of chapter 7. We'll start on verse 7, and we'll go through verse 12. For oppression makes a wise man mad, and a bribe corrupts the heart. The end of a matter is better than its beginning. Patience of spirit is better than haughtiness of spirit. Do not be eager in your heart to be angry, for anger resides in the bosom of fools. Do not say, why is it that the former days were better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask about this. Wisdom, along with an inheritance, is good, and an advantage to those who see the sun. For wisdom is protection, just as money is protection. But the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the lives of its possessors. I'm glad some of you had that furrowed brow when you look at me. You're like, what is that? I promise it'll make sense. Let's go to verse 7. What does Solomon say next in regards to men's hearts being tested? He says, for oppression makes a wise man mad. So is that true? I mean, is that just a true statement? If you are a wise man and you're looking and somebody's being oppressed, it would make you angry. So that's a logical first place to begin there. So what can cause a wise man to turn away his madness when he sees oppression in that verse? A bribe corrupts the heart. So the wise man began with being angry, but he can be bribed to turn away. So that's the warning that Solomon has. So a wise man can fall into this trap of looking the other way and ignoring the oppression. Verse 8. How is the difference finally proven out? The end of the matter is better than its beginning. So what end of the matter is presented first in that verse in 8? Patience of spirit is better. The matter of what? What were they just talking about in verse 7? The dealing with oppression. Okay? So patience in dealing with this matter of oppression is better than haughtiness of spirit. What is haughtiness?
Pride.
It can be to be proud about something. In this case, it would be unsympathetically proud, right? Or egotistically arrogant. So the person watching the oppression can have these attitudes. They're not good attitudes, right? But that's what haughtiness means. So who is to be shown the patience of spirit? I'm going to give you time to ponder that one because I want you to think it through.
Say it again.
Who is to be shown the patience of spirit?
One who takes it for pride.
The oppressor. Does that surprise you? It's the oppressor that's being talked about. The patience is to be given to the oppressor. It's not about the oppressed. Right? How easy it is for us when we feel we're taking the righteous route to show that guy doing the wrong thing just how wrong they are. And Solomon says, you should have patience with the oppressor. Just because they're wrong doesn't mean you don't handle it in a patient fashion. In verse 9, what does Solomon warn against? Do not be eager in your heart to be angry. What is this anger a display of? The anger resides in the bosom of fools. So here's a recap, because we need to keep this in order, right? Man is to be mad when he sees oppression, and he is not to be bought out with bribery. He is to be patient with the oppressor and not haughty, and he is not to allow his anger to overtake him in dealing with the oppressor. Are we better able to do this if we are understanding that God is sovereign and he's the judge? Yes, question.
I hate to, but how do you under that?
Well, I would say it's because at the beginning in verse 7, he starts with, for oppression is what makes the wise man mad. So he's talking about this wise man looking at oppression. If I'm the wise man and I'm looking at oppression, am I mad at the one being oppressed, or am I mad at the oppressor?
What if he is being oppressed, the wise man?
It's the same thing. He's still so it doesn't matter if you are the oppressor or the wise man. The focus was back. The wise man being oppressed or just being the outsider seeing the oppression, both of those are in a position to see the oppression and to be mad at the oppressor, whether they're the ones experiencing it themselves or seeing somebody else. That's why I start with that focus. Correct. So the question is the patience of spirit being a question of the wise man having patience of their spirit for the oppressor? And I say yes. That's why those verses are all kept together, because they're all about the same theme, starting with the oppression and how somebody would be mad seeing it. And I think it's also true, and maybe it's just because it's unique to me, I know how I respond when I see oppression. Whether it's happening to me, quite often it's not. It's somebody else. And by golly, I'm going to show you just what you did to that person and how terrible you were for doing it to that person. And I get all caught up in my self-righteousness and in my showing you what's better, because that's what I deal with. Amen. And I'm not just saying, I have had to stop myself on the highway where I see one person cutting somebody else off or doing something on the highway. And you know what, ladies? I'm going to set the record straight, because I'm going to go do to that person what I just saw them do. That is not the spirit I should have. And by the way, it's why I don't have a Christian fish on the back of my car, because that's not a good witness or testimony. I have a tennis ball. They'll know that I play tennis, but then... And it's something that when I sense it, when I feel it, I know I have to take that to the Lord, because that's just the way I am built. Yes, another question? It's not about that. This is about the heart issue. So it's okay to be irritated at the oppression, and if you're in a position that you can do something, that's fine. The first warning is don't turn away to bribery. So I think, again, this is being talked about at the high level. Those that are in positions that should be doing the right thing, be righteous, be, not oppressing. So yeah, it can be true in our individual lives, but the focus he's given before is those that are in power. Because those that are in power are the ones that would be subject to bribery and corruption. You can find that at the lower level, but usually it's at the governmental level that this would be true. Yes, yeah. Yes, we can definitely see that. Okay, so verse 10, what else does Solomon warn against? Do not say, why is it that the former days were better than these? So what is meant by former days? Days that are in your past, the former days. The good old days, that's what's in my notes. What is meant by these in that verse? The word these has a reference to what? The current days. That's right. So Solomon says man should not look back on the past as being better than what God is providing in the present. And as Barbara just shared, wishing for the good old days. What is lacking when men do this? For it is not from wisdom that you ask about this. So a man of wisdom does not keep focused on past. He embraces what God has put before him. Be content right here where you are. This is going to be borne out in the remaining verses here, but just think on that for a moment, how many people resonate these thoughts to you or share them with you. When I used to be able to do this and get on the floor and get back up, now it can be simple things, right? I remember when, I find it interesting. So watching TV shows that are from a period piece. So this is the one I'm watching, and they're kind of in the 60s. And wow, the whole thing that was being blown up in the 60s, and free love and drugs and all this horrible, horrible things, right? If you have a different perspective than that. And you're like, that was 60 years ago. So it wasn't all that much better. We have a tendency to look at today and go, well, it is just really, really, really bad. Well, it wasn't really all that great back then either. And if you went 60 years before that, you'd find it wasn't all that great then. Here's what if you picture yourself playing a part in a movie, a time period movie, are you the princess in the castle, dressed up, getting the bath and having all the servants? Always, right? You're not the poor woman on the back acreage owned by the Lord, milking the cow every day, right? Bearing children, nursing children, bearing more children, nursing more children, day in, day out, drudgery, no ointment, right? Right? That's not who you picture yourself as. But statistically, guess which one you would have been? Right? That's exactly the truth of it. So there is no good old days if we really stop and we think about it. But that is our tendency to think of the good old days. And Solomon says, don't do that. Don't resonate. Don't let your mind just ponder on the good old days. He's put you here on this planet, in this place, at this period of time for his own will. Be aware of that and keep that as your focus. Do you have a question?
Not a question, a comment. For me, I prefer indoor.
There you go. So we have somebody that's used both outdoor and indoor, and yes, so I agree with you that there are some things that are better, but I wouldn't want to be a plumber. So for some people, it's not necessarily all better. All right, so we want to go on with verse 11. What is good? He said, wisdom along with an inheritance is good. What specific wisdom was just defined by Solomon? Staying focused on the present life. That's the specific wisdom he just revealed to us. This is why context is important. Are there different nuggets of wisdom throughout all of Scripture? Yes, but he's specifically just shared the nugget of wisdom he wants us to stay focused on. What is an inheritance? All right, it's something, it can be a quality or a characteristic, right? I inherited my eye color or my height, right? Genetically, that's what gets passed on. or an immaterial possession of some sort that can be passed on, not something that, I walk in with my hands. It can be received from somebody previous to me, a predecessor, passing it on to the successor. So that's an inheritance. Sometimes we think of inheritance and we go, piece of land, money in the bank, object on my mantle to dust. That's what we think of as an inheritance. But an inheritance can be other things that you get passed down to you. So that which a man has now passed on to him from those who went before him is what we're considering inheritance. It's not just financial possessions. For a man to stay focused on what he has in his present circumstances and remember what he has been afforded from the past has what? An advantage to those who see the sun. Those who see the sun are who? The living, right? They still can feel that sunshine. So there is wisdom for the living in keeping this focus on daily life. Right? Doesn't mean I ignore what's been given. It doesn't mean I don't have to recognize the days of past. I just can't glamorize the days of past. That's the difference. In verse 12, what does Solomon say about this type of wisdom? So wisdom is protection just as money is protection. Okay. How is money a protection to the man who has it?
Gets you the indoor plumbing.
It gets you the indoor plumbing, exactly. So man can use money to buy what he needs now, right? It keeps us from being in want now in our physical needs, right? That's just a true statement, what we can see with money. So Solomon says that wisdom provides for the man in the same manner to the man who has it now and sees it providing his life focus in the present. It does the same thing. Money provides protection for that person in the same way that this wisdom of staying focused on the present is a protection for that person. They are the same in that protective nature. Solomon says, what about looking for an advantage in life? In that verse. But the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the lives of its possessors. For the life of the man who understands this wisdom is preserved. So what does preserved mean? Make lasting. Make lasting. That's how something is preserved. You make it last. That's why we pay lots of money for face creams and things like that. Question?
You are a living testimony.
And what is so we have the question in regards to tying the chapter together in this chapter, and it's been shared that it is the end of life. Your reputation is like this. But what I would say is, what Solomon would like the living to focus on is that it is day by day the reputation is established. Because if I sit around and I sit on my laurels, I might think, I've made enough sacrifices. On the scale of good and bad, I got enough good. I'm not going to worry about putting more marbles on that scale, right? So, in the New Testament, we have that reminder, don't look back behind. And that means don't look just at the bad that you want to say, I just need to get over it, I've been forgiven. Don't be sitting on your laurels for the good, because that's what sets you up to maybe fall before the end of life and have that reputation tarnished.
Retirement can do. He says,
Right.
They're not done.
Right. There is no such thing as retirement from this life in the things that God calls us to do in this life. That's Sophie's way of saying, please don't think you're retired from children's ministry. And if you would like to help, don't you like that? There's no retirement. Yes.
What I get out of your reputation.
But he's making the comparison of how they're the same. He says he can use money to buy what he needs now. Let's see, how did he word it? I have to go back. For wisdom is protection, just as money is protection. So he's saying they're the same. He's not trying to compare them as to one is better or worse than the other. So just like your money can go away, so can your reputation. It doesn't matter what you do. There's a lot of people whose reputation has been ruined and they had nothing to do with it. They did nothing wrong. Right? So their money can come and go and your reputation can come and go. Work on what you're called to do today and don't worry about yesterday. Don't worry about what somebody said or did in the past. You just do what you're supposed to do every day and you let the Lord work out the difference. Okay? All right, we have 2 more verses. And I know you guys have no more questions. All of these verses so far have just been smooth and easy sailing, right? You're going to love the next 2. All right, so we're going to do verses 13 and 14. Consider the work of God, for who is able to straighten what he has bent? In the day of prosperity, be happy, but in the day of adversity, consider. God has made the one as well as the other, so that man will not discover anything that will be after him. Interesting. So verse 13. Where does Solomon lead us next? How does he begin? Consider the work of God. In this quest for wisdom and knowledge that Solomon has had his journey on, Solomon says we are to look at the work of God for our answer. So in all these things that don't make sense, and there's a little bit of, is it oppression or not oppression, and how is money? He goes, all right, let's just consider God in this. Let's put the explanation point at the end of this. So we're going to consider God. What does Solomon ask us to consider first? So who is able to straighten what he has bent? So who is the he who has bent? So God. God has designed something to go a certain way, and here it's described as bent. What is Solomon's rhetorical question? Who is able to straighten what he has bent? If someone does not like the way God designed or bent something and wants it to be another way, described as straightening, Solomon asks, who is able to do this? The answer is, no one is able to change the design of God. That's kind of that whole sovereignty thing we've been talking about as we've worked through this book. What God has determined is, period. In verse 14, since no one can change what God has planned, how are we to respond? How does it begin? In the day of prosperity, be happy. Well, that's easy. I can do that. Nobody has a problem with that one, right? That's the easy one to understand. What else are we to do? But in the day of adversity, consider God has made the one as well as the other. What is a day of adversity?
Lose your job.
Yeah, that's right. Lose the job, lose the husband, have something that the house burns down, your health is not there anymore, right? There's different definitions for day of adversity. You can't get off the floor. You like that, right? So when things don't seem to be going well or we feel oppressed, those are the days of adversity. So in good time and in bad, what are we to remember about God according to that verse? God has made the one as well as the other. Solomon wants to underscore so everybody gets it. I want to underscore so everybody gets it. Solomon clearly says God made the day of prosperity and the day of adversity. They both come from God. You know I'm going to take you somewhere else in Scripture to underscore that, just to make sure we get on the same track, okay? Amos chapter 3, verses 6 and 7 says, "If a trumpet is blown in a city, will not the people tremble? If a calamity occurs in a city, has not the Lord done it? Surely the Lord God does nothing unless he reveals his secret counsel to his servants, the prophets." So God reveals to prophets in advance of calamity to demonstrate to the people that the calamity is from him. Why else does he tell them ahead of time that it's coming? He's telling them ahead of time so when it happens, they know, oh, by the way, that was from me. I wasn't taking a nap and that happened. I wasn't turning the other way in heaven and was distracted, and so this bad thing happened. He said, no, I'm letting you know a calamity is coming, so when it comes, you will know it's from me. That's God speaking. We can also see in Isaiah chapter 45, verses 5 through 7, "I am the Lord, and there is no other. Besides me, there is no God. I will gird you, though you have not known me, that men may know from the rising to the setting of the sun that there is no one besides me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. The one forming light and creating darkness, causing well-being and creating calamity. I am the Lord who does all these." Can he be any more specific? He says, I do it all. So the Lord says he creates darkness and he creates calamity. He does all. He is not a bystander. He says he creates all. He doesn't just allow a vacuum to happen, right? And then the thing happens. No, he says, I created it. This is hard teaching, ladies. This is not an easy way to teach. It's very difficult to grasp this significance of understanding God's sovereignty. Remember I told you a lot of people have the line in the sand about what sovereignty is? Well, God clearly states in his word from the beginning to the end, I created everything. That means everything. Everything you go through, everything the world around you is going through. Oh, hello. Don't be distracted. It's still under his purview. It's still what he's in charge of. Let that resonate in your heart. Ecclesiastes 7:14, why? This is interesting. Why does God bring both prosperity and adversity? So that man will not discover anything that will be after him. What does that mean? It's partly about living in the present, yeah. True, nothing is certain. God does not give away what his plans are for the future of a man. By doing both of these things in all men's lives, it is God's intention to confuse men by doing the unexpected. When there is suffering in our present life, we do not know what that means in regards to our future. Right? Romans 8:18 says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is revealed to us." So Paul makes it clear in his life as he's going through adversity, he's not going to let that dissuade him from knowing what's in his future. God uses all things for his purposes. We see that also in Romans 8, This is verse 28. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Here's the punchline. Man can't know his destiny after this life by what God did for him in this temporal life. It is not like only good things happen to men in this life that God has planned to bring to salvation after this life, or to bring bad things to men in this life who he's not going to bring to salvation. And the reverse is true as well. Picture that. He doesn't here allow good things to happen because he knows for you in the future you're going to be with him and you have good things in the future. He would be forecasting that. Only people I know in eternity, this is God speaking, only people I know I'm going to bring here to eternity am I going to give good things here. So he doesn't do that. He also doesn't do, I'm going to give you good things in eternity so you only get the yuck throughout this entire life. He doesn't give us that hint either. He says, I don't want you to know, based on what you see poured out here, what the destination of another person is. So he says, I do it to confuse men so that you don't get to figure it out here. Does that fly in the face of what we call the prosperity gospel that says you are a child of God there and the eternal life, so obviously God's going to just pour out blessings in your life and the here and the now? Solomon says that is not true. That is not what God does. And he doesn't just give bad things to people here who he has in the future a relationship with. He says, I am God, and I alone decide whether I'm going to give out the good or bad here. But know this, I'm in charge of it, and I'm sovereign, and I decide. You just accept that. That's the point. Knowing that he is sovereign, can you be content in the situation that he's placed you in now? It's trust. And I just love, I had not seen that before. I mean, I've seen sovereignty and that we don't know what God's going to, but the reason why, he says, this is the reason why I do that. So you don't get to, if this were opposite, let's say God said, I'm going to provide you in this life with really great and wonderful things. And by that, you're going to know your position before me in eternity. Then I could look at somebody who's going through difficult times or adversity or health, and I'd be able to come to what conclusion? Man, you're not walking good with the Lord. And ladies, there are people who teach that, and it is devastating. And it is a lie from the enemy. Yes, question?
Part of Job's friends. Yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely. If we did the whole book of Job, that would again be a picture of this. You do not know what God's purposes and reasons are, but you can take comfort in the fact that you know he's sovereign, he brings all things, and he asks you to be content in that moment. So the conclusion then is that we can't tell what God's plan is for the future, and therefore we must embrace all God brings us here, knowing that he has an unchanging plan. And how can you sit in that and just feel like he's put his cloak of protection over you? That you know everything passes through his hand before it comes? You know what your destiny is. So in knowing that, then he says you just accept what comes today, and you demonstrate that you know me or have trust in me by accepting it and seeking my will for you today. That's the drumbeat that Solomon is giving at the end of his life, looking back. And he calls that wisdom, And he says it's the only way for you to know a true advantage to life. Think about that. You guys are getting the nugget of wisdom that it took Solomon, the wisest man in the world that we know of, to come up with. And he's given it to you on the silver platter of Ecclesiastes. You can have a whole different outlook than the world that's going to fall apart around you. And ladies, the world is going to fall apart around you. And I'm not just talking Revelation and all that. I'm talking about, guess what? The next week or so, there's going to be a whole lot of things that people are going to be all up in arms about. And I'm telling you, do not leave your understanding that God is sovereign and every event is sovereign and every person is placed in a position for his sovereign will. What are you to do? Whatever he's told you to do that day. You follow his will. You know that there's an ultimate plan. You know you can place your trust in him and your faith in him and what he has promised for you. Does that mean that things might not happen to your retirement or your house or your security or all the things that can happen? No, because I would never say that, because that wouldn't be true. The focus is on eternity and you walking day by day knowing that he has that in mind for you. And don't let your temporal life or temporal conditions be where you live in that sense, in the fearful, and what do you need to change? Live day by day for what it provides. This was like being in the house of mourning for you all today, right? Instead of I hope you were able to feast on it though, because there is nothing more important that we walk away with. This man gave us beautiful golden nuggets for how we are to live this life and go forward. Who would like to close us in prayer as we go forward in this day with what he has for us?